We've been running a theme at Sanganite, and in that theme we've been exploring the Buddhist path through stories, so both Buddhist stories and contemporary stories. Buddhism is in many ways a rational tradition, but it also speaks to our deeper emotional drives. It speaks the language of the depths, and one of the ways it does that is through stories. So within this theme of telling stories, we're looking at what's called 5 great stages of the path, or 5 aspects of the spiritual path. So they're listed up there, you can't read them. Integration, positive emotion, spiritual death, spiritual rebirth, and receptivity. So during this theme we'll be going through those 5 aspects through the medium of stories. So far this year we've been looking at integration. So the process of gathering together all the different aspects of ourselves, our shadowy depths and uglier drives, as well as our unexpressed heights and potentials. And the reason that we do that is that that as much of our being as possible is flowing in the same direction, is behind our practice, so that we can make a realistic commitment and follow through on that commitment. And tonight we're moving on to the second stage, proper, which is positive emotion. So, in the first stage we talked about becoming an integrated individual. But in a way it's not enough simply to become an integrated individual to pull ourselves together. We also have to be an individual that's connected with the world around it. So the word positive is quite vague, isn't it? I mean, positive means different things to different people. Most self-help books will involve the phrase positive thinking, for example. But in Buddhism, it means something very specific here. It really means ethically skillful. So it's emotion that is conducive to our own well-being and the well-being of others. So the stage of positive emotion is about becoming someone who is learning to relate skillfully and positively to the world around them. Someone whose deeper emotions, deeper drives are brought on side and channeled in a skillful direction. So intellectual understanding is not enough on its own. The way we actually live our lives is much more influenced by our emotional attitudes and by our desires. Emotions and desires are the main reason for why we act the way that we do. They're what drives us, they're what moves us. Whether we like it or not, we are creatures of desire. Our emotional depths need to be acknowledged, woken up, engaged with, transformed. Otherwise we just lack the energy that we'll need to keep on practicing. And we use an image for this on the introductory course, which some of you might remember. I think originally invented by Vidanya. So it's the image of our inner cellar, or our inner banquet hall. Okay, so it's as if deep down in us there is this cellar, there's this medieval banquet hall, and in that banquet hall there are all sorts of weird and wonderful figures. There's kings and queens, poets, wizards, warriors, and they're all covered in cobwebs and fast asleep. And occasionally one of them just looks up into the surface of our being to see what we're up to and goes, "Oh, boring," and goes back to sleep. Okay? So we've got all these figures, all these deep, magical, this potential within us, which we need to wake up, we need to get interested in, engage with. Okay, so there are many skillful emotions described in the Buddhist teachings, but the fundamental skillful emotion which runs through them all is metta. So you've all been introduced to metta. And a common confusion about metta is that it's basically a nice feeling that you have towards other people. So metta is not just a warm, glowy feeling. What's really important with metta is the strong desire for others' well-being, and the intention to act on that wherever possible. So you could say that metta is the fundamental ethical state, just that concern, that desire for the well-being of ourselves and others. And metta, it's a very sublime ideal. Unlike romantic love, it's not possessive, it's not territorial, it's not exclusive, and it's not conditional. Rather than having a single object, it's all-inclusive, all-embracing, always moving outwards, naturally expansive. So that's the ideal. But we have to start from where we actually are, how we actually feel. We need to be honest and realistic about, well, where our energies really are, our passions, our longings, where we're directing those parts of ourselves. We have to do that before we have a chance of cultivating something more refined, more universal, less conditional. So we start from where we are. And very often that seems a very long way off from all-inclusive, all-embracing, unconditional love. So that's why in the Buddhist tradition, we get a practice that helps us to start to bridge the gap from where we are to this sublime ideal. And of course, that is the practice of metta bhavana. So metta bhavana starts with a concern for our own well-being, because actually that's where we are most of the time. So on any given day, we might, whatever our opinion of ourselves, whatever our feeling about ourselves on any given day, we can't really deny that of all beings in the universe, one is of particular interest to us, and that's this one. To me, not to you. So we take its feelings and thoughts most seriously, we protect it most vigorously, we secure its advantage as best we can. And somewhere in all of that lies the seed of a really positive emotion, concern for ourselves that can be intensified and extended out to others, to friends, to strangers, to enemies, to all beings. But we're not only individuals having effect on ourselves and on other individuals, we're also trying to create a context in which the barriers between individuals start to soften. A context where people can come closer together, thrive together, and in that context, spiritual progress is far more likely. And it becomes less important about which particular individual is making progress. So, of course, the context that I'm talking about is Sangha. So one of the great demons of our age is individualism, which gives rise to lonely, alienated, fragmented lives. So the great work of Sangha is to tame that demon, the demon of a belief in the separateness of me and you, and to continually be creating and recreating a deeper and deeper harmony. And the Sangha, it flourishes or fails, it succeeds or fails, first and foremost depending on the power of metta in that Sangha. So tonight I'm going to illustrate this with a story from the life of the Buddha tonight. We'll have a Buddhist story. And this story takes place about 10 years after the Buddha's enlightenment. And it takes place in somewhere called Kosambi, in the north of India. And in Kosambi there was a Sangha. There was a Sangha of monks. And in that Sangha there was a serious split. It was the first big split in the Buddha's Sangha. So in Kosambi, they basically split into two factions. And there were two particularly strong personalities. So one of these he was the expert of rules in the Sangha. So he was like the guardian of all the monastic rules. And the other personality, his main job was to teach the Dharma. So we had these two personalities, one who was focused on preserving the rules, and one who was focused on teaching the Dharma. And what happened is that the Dharma teacher, one day he went to the toilet, and After he'd finished his business, he left water in the water pot. Ooh. So, as someone, I've actually lived in an Indian village for several years, and this custom is still there. Like, so, after you've been to the toilet, you always empty the water pot and you leave it outside the latrine. And the first thing you do before you go to the toilet is you fill your own water pot. I don't know where it came from. Probably something to do with health and hygiene. So the Dharma teacher had broken one of the rules, one of the minor rules of being a monk. This was a minor infringement. So the expert of the rules questioned him. He said, well, why have you done that? You've broken a rule by leaving water in the water pot. And the Dharma teacher said, well, actually I didn't know it was an offence. It was such a minor rule that he just wasn't aware that he'd broken it. So the master of rules said, okay, if you didn't know it was an offence, then it wasn't an offence. But now you know, so be careful next time. And but then what he did was he went and he started talking to his own pupils, his own sort of particular followers, his own little group of fans. And he started gossiping. He said, and do you know that the Dharma teacher, he didn't know about the rule of leaving water in the latrine pot. Starts this wave of gossip going. And then this gossip spread throughout the Sangha. So the pupils of the Dharma teacher got to hear about this. And it started to escalate. So they accused the master of rules of being a liar. And then what happened is that the master of rules tried to get the Dharma teacher suspended from the Sangha. And then the Dharma teacher refused to recognise the suspension. So you have both these strong personalities trying to whip up support for each other, for themselves, rallying support. And gradually, we don't know from the sutta how long it took, but gradually divisions started to deepen. And more people got drawn into this dispute, like a whirlpool. And it got increasingly bitter, increasingly serious. So it was said that the monks were stabbing each other with verbal daggers, brawling and quarrelling. Probably they forgot about what was the start of it, but the more harsh, abusive words were used, that's what was remembered. And each side tried to convince the other side that they were right and tried to encourage them to defect to their side. So it escalated like this until there was this huge standoff, this stalemate. And, the Sangha at Kosambi was in real risk of completely falling apart. Okay. So to give you a taste of what happens, we're going to have some audience participation. So this is experimental. The more you participate, the less embarrassing it will be for me. So. Good. So, before that, so we're going to go two factions. So this faction are the followers of the Master of Rules. So you're into rules. And these are the followers of the Dharma teacher. You know their teacher left water in the latrine pot?
Whose teacher? Their teacher left water in the latrine.
Yeah, that's right. That's good.
Right. Their teacher left water in the latrine pot.
Really?
Over here. Okay, so now it starts to spread, news starts to spread to the other side. Your teacher. It's quite exciting, isn't it?
like it too.
So that was the Pali Canon meets Panto meets Friday Night on a West Street. So something had clearly gone very wrong. So yeah, the monks in Kosambi, they were polarised. They were gravitating around fixed positions, hardened views. They probably completely forgot about the cause of the argument. And this happened in a Sangha of Buddhist monks just 10 years after the Buddha's enlightenment. But they weren't actually being a Sangha in that moment because they were not practicing metta deeply enough. So the monks were not taking responsibility for their own behaviour. They were too busy analysing each other's faults, nursing resentments, blaming, lobbying. They were indulging in gossiping, backbiting. Gossip and backbiting, it's a really seductive way of forming bonds and alliances, forming groups, creating a faction that fancies itself higher than the other lot. Sometimes it's really easy to be drawn into that. We all like to feel that we're on the right side. It's something very primal in human beings, I think. But it's highly destructive to the task of building a Sangha. And the monks were clearly not working on their own minds. They weren't cultivating thoughts and feelings of love that would give rise to loving speech and action. They were cultivating, nursing thoughts and feelings that gave rise to quarrelling, that gave rise to stabbing each other with verbal daggers, with wounding each other. And this break in harmony started with a really trivial matter. But because the monks were not taking responsibility for their own mental states, they weren't practicing metta deeply enough, it escalated quickly into a major conflict. And again and again in the Pali Canon, it talks about beware of trifling faults, beware of small matters that could lead to small conflicts, which could lead to medium-sized conflicts, which could lead to World War I. Something quite familiar in this situation for me. As I said, I spent a few years living in an Indian village, probably something like Kosambi. And this was a children's project. And I go back about twice every year, just for a few days, to visit and to spend time with people. So everybody knows me, but I'm no longer an insider. So what I do is I go and I spend time with all the people that work at that project. And all the sort of things that they've kept down, all the little resentments, all the little grudges, I get to hear them all. I get to hear bad news about everyone who works in that project. And so I find it really unpleasant, actually, that side of things. I mean, there's parts of going back which I love, but this feeling that it's really difficult to trust anyone because I've heard bad things about everyone from other people. So disharmony is like that. It's really poisonous. It gets in the way of creativity, It blocks potential, it blocks freedom. And I'm not immune to it. So only last week, I got into a mental state where I was very overtired and overstressed. And I was in a meeting last week where I started speaking in a way which was blaming others. And, it had an effect on one of my friends. And afterwards I felt real intense remorse about it. It's one of the times when I know I've been unskillful, where it really, really sort of burns deep inside. Because I value Sangha so much, I value harmony so much. When I speak in a way that erodes that or gets in the way of that, it really affects me. Okay, so this was happening in Kosambi, this full-scale dispute, and somebody went to fetch the Buddha. So obviously somebody who was very concerned about what was happening and thought, okay, we need to get the Buddha in here to talk to these monks, to get them to see sense. So the Buddha arrives and he hears about what's been going on, and he's really, really disturbed. He says, there's going to be a schism in the Sangha. This hadn't happened before. And he gives them a stern warning. He says, misguided men, this is going to lead to your harm and suffering for a long, long time. So he was deeply bothered by this prospect of disharmony. Elsewhere in the Pali Canon, he describes the ideal disciple, the ideal follower, as somebody who rejoices in harmony, who's passionate about harmony. Harmony is his delight. So, this word harmony, it's a translation of a Pali word, samaga. But what do we mean by harmony? Well, what harmony doesn't mean is all doing the same thing. It doesn't mean uniformity. It's actually about discovering a deep solidarity with others. And in that solidarity, we are free to be more distinctly and more fully ourselves. So a really good image for this, which is often used, is the orchestra. So in an orchestra, so all the different instruments obviously have different parts. If you got each instrument in the orchestra to play their part individually, it would sound really, really strange. So, if there was a symphony and you said, okay, the oboe's just going to play their part, it would just sound really strange. But when all those instruments play together, something is created which really lifts the heart. It's more than the sum of all those individual parts. And harmony supports individual genius. So whatever the genre of music, so as Vidania said the other week, if don't pretend you're into Puccini when you're into punk. Is that right? So yeah, the virtuoso solo, the solo pianist in a piano concerto, the mind-blowing sax improvisation in a jazz quartet, the jaw-dropping electric guitar solo in a rock band, the killer rap in a hip-hop number. So these displays of genius really impress my mind when I hear them. I think, that's amazing, how can they do that? But part of me is always waiting for the return of that central harmonious melody, when all the instruments come back together and create this uplifting collective sound. So that's what actually touches the heart, this harmony of all the instruments together. I was actually at a Beethoven concert, wasn't punk, last weekend, and it was this old guy, apparently very famous pianist, called Rudolf Buchbinder. Must have been in his 70s. And he was the soloist and the conductor, which was remarkable. And there were just moments when he was playing on his own. I was just like completely spellbound. I think because he'd probably been playing Beethoven for decades, it was like he was the music in that moment. It was just really spellbinding. But then suddenly he'd leap up from his chair and sort of bring the orchestra back in. And, just the when the orchestra sort of joined in again, that's what really, really moved me every time. So that's what we mean by harmony. So back at Kosambi, the Buddha has a go at sorting the monks out, in helping them to see the error of their way. So he gives a discourse. He tries to get through to them. And what he teaches them is a good old Buddhist list. It is the 6 memorable qualities that are needed to maintain harmony. So the 6 memorable qualities for maintaining harmony in a Sangha. So the first 3 are to do with metta. So metta, practicing metta in body, in speech, and in mind. So in the sutta, these aren't unpacked, they're just named as a list. So, what do these mean to us? Let's try and unpack these for us. So metta in body. And just to say, with metta in body, speech and mind, both openly and privately is always added. So both in public and in private. So metta in body. So this is about acting on our kind impulses. Phoning a friend up, writing a note, doing the washing up after a class. Just small, simple, unshowy acts of kindness. And they really go a long way. I live in the community out the back door there, and we've started a bit of a tradition that when people go away on retreat or on holiday, when they come back, they'll always find on their bed or in their bedroom flowers, cards, gifts, just tokens that they've been missed and that they're welcome back. We can respond to requests for help. Or we can help someone without them even having to ask. I think I noticed Amogavamsa today decorating the room of someone who's on retreat, so that when he gets back, he hasn't had to ask, but we realised there was work to be done in his room. I say we. Amogavamsa realised there was work to be done in his room and did it. And generally, in the centre, being openly friendly, welcoming, engaging. So that is metta in action, metta in body. And that can be really attractive for others. It can really draw people in. A really good opportunity to be part of that is during introductory courses. So when we lead introductory courses here, we have a support team of members of the Sangha. And the main thing that we ask them to do is come and be friendly. And welcoming and engaging with newcomers and with each other, just to really sort of demonstrate what metta in action is like. Then we have metta in speech. Okay, so all sorts of things come in here. Expressing your gratitude to someone, overcoming your reservations, and just telling someone how much they mean to you, how much you appreciate them. Praising people's qualities, to their face or behind their backs. Encouraging people. So when you see that someone's clearly making an effort, just really encouraging that. Offering words of encouragement. Noticing when someone's looking out of sorts, reaching out to them, saying a kind word. That can have a really dramatic effect, actually, when people often remember a time when they've been here and they've been having a difficult time and someone's just said that kind word at just the right time. The practice of apologising is really important. Apologising for any upset we may have caused. So I talked about last week how I was involved in blaming speech, so I tried as quickly as possible to apologise for that. And the other person involved was ready to forgive me. So being ready to forgive each other as many times as is necessary. And the other aspect of metta in speech is having the courage to say something to someone, to point something out. If you're really concerned that they're acting in a way that's going to harm themselves or others, that can also have a really dramatic effect. it can be uncomfortable to do that and to receive that. But people very often look back at how crucial it was that someone pointed out something to them with kindness at just the right time. So meta's not just about being cheerful and nice and lovely. Fundamentally, it's about being the means to each other's spiritual growth. And sometimes that involves a bit of a challenge. And then we have metta in mind. Okay. So we're lucky to have a practice which helps us to cultivate metta in mind, the metta bhavana, to nurture and cultivate kind thoughts and kind feelings. And we can do that sitting on the meditation cushion, doing the metta bhavana, but it's important we take it off the cushion as well. Do that in everyday life. And yeah, if we're finding it difficult to engage with the metta bhavana, it's important that we keep going with finding ways to engage. And if we get stuck, asking for help. Because abandoning the practice of metta bhavana, well, presumably that's what the monks at Kosambi did. It can have serious collective effects. So we could see, rather than seeing metta bhavana just as a private practice that we do, we could see it as a collective practice, as a gift to the Sangha, or even as a duty to the Sangha. Through us doing the metta bhavana, we are builders of a strong Sangha. And when resentment or irritation arises, as it will, then we have a tool in the metta bhavana to do something about it. So we can expand what we choose to focus on. Okay? We can see more of the person who's irritating us than just what irritates us or infuriates us. We can start to soften the walls that we put around such feelings. In the metta bhavana, we're looking deeply into the essential things that unite us with others. With friends, with enemies, with strangers. The drives we have, the needs we have, our aspirations, our longings, our desire to be free from suffering, our desire to be happy. That is what unites us with all other beings. So only when we really dwell at that level can we start to see through the fog that's created by our personal likes and dislikes and our stories about other people. Okay, and then we have a shared ethical code. Okay, so in the Sangha we have a shared ethical code. We have a shared training, a shared understanding of the ethical precepts. And it's important that is the touchstone of how we live our lives, of how we discuss things around the Sangha. It's easy for this to get coloured by politics, by philosophy, by current affairs, by the latest fashionable thing. So yeah, again, it's important that we see ethics as a collective matter, not just a private matter. The way I act affects my brothers and sisters. So the deeper we are all committed to that ethical training, the deeper the harmony we can create. Okay, and then we have a shared vision. So yeah, it's important that all our practices, both individual and collective, come out of a common vision. Okay, so the Buddha, 2,500 years ago, he attained enlightenment, and he gave us teachings to help us grow towards that vision. And we're fortunate enough now, 2,500 years later, to have been given a clear presentation of those teachings, which makes them accessible to us and possible to practice. So the more we can get a clearer, shared understanding of these teachings, the greater the harmony is possible. And then finally, a shared life. So yeah, given our different lifestyles, we need to find ways of living and working as closely as we can with others who share our commitment to Buddhist practice. So that might not mean living in a community or working in a Buddhist business. But, fundamentally it's about actually being together, coming together, being together, involving ourselves as much as possible in the life of the Sangha. Coming to Sangha night, supporting introductory courses, coming on Sangha retreats, attending festivals. There's many, many ways that we can involve ourselves in the life of the centre. And one way is to come on a Sangha Works Day. And the next one of those is March the 28th. On a Sangha Works Day, a group of people come together for most of the day, we meditate together, and we do lots of work around the centre, in the building, in the garden. And it's a great occasion for, well, for keeping the Sangha looking nice, but also for creating that sense of harmony and a shared life. Okay. So back to Kosambi. So the Buddha's tried to intervene using this discourse. And what happens is they completely ignore him. They ask him to leave, actually. They say, don't worry yourself. This is our problem. We created this problem. It's our responsibility. You go into the forest, have a peaceful time. We'll sort it out. And at that point, basically the Buddha has to give up, and he leaves, and he moves on, and he's deeply saddened by this, because he knows that the monks are causing themselves a lot of harm, but he can't do anything about it. They're so caught up in ill will that they're not able to be receptive. Sometimes we can't solve other people's quarrels. That's painful, but we have to bear the sadness of that. Often the best thing we can do is avoid taking sides. That's the most we can do. And sometimes our own conflicts that we get involved with, they can't actually be resolved by just thrashing out. It's only a commitment to go deeper with our practice will be enough, so that we start to meet each other at a deeper level of solidarity. So we're going to leave the monks of Kosambi now, but that's not quite the end of the story. So after the Buddha left them, the local villagers were so disgusted by the monks' behaviour that they stopped giving them food. So the monks depended on the gifts of food from the local people. And that really hit them. So where the Buddha had failed, trying to appeal to their minds, trying to appeal to their better nature, the villagers succeeded by depriving them of depriving their stomachs, appealing to their baser instincts. And that teaches us a couple of lessons as well. So, firstly, when disharmony and bickering arises, it has a really negative effect on those around us. It's really unappealing, it's off-putting. So, why would I want to be part of that group of people who are quarrelling and bickering? Why would I want to support that? And secondly, when we get involved in dispute, it's as if we're cutting ourselves off from what sustains us and inspires us. Our mind is so full of righteous indignations. It's as if we're starving ourselves of the nutrition of love and respect and harmony, united aspirations. Because of the audience participation, I've gone way over time, so I'm thinking I'm going to cut this. Okay, so at the heart of spiritual practice, at the heart of spiritual freedom, lies a profound, loving harmony and union. The monks at Kosambi had sacrificed that and, as I said, deprived themselves of their own nutrition. And I think in this particular age, where loneliness and alienation are so prevalent, people are crying out for union, for harmony, for union with something that's truly beautiful, that's genuinely satisfying. So that's what metta gives. It has the power to take us beyond our usual alienated experience towards this deeper, satisfying harmony. And if we're looking for signs of spiritual progress and spiritual attainment, that's what to look for. Okay, I think we had a taste of that a couple of weeks ago. So 3 or 4 weeks ago, there was a ceremony in this hall in which the Sangha rejoiced in the merits of Vedanya and Surumati for all their efforts over the years. And the responsibility for being chair of the centre was handed over to me. And when I look back on that ceremony, I was so moved that there are about 100 people here, and it was really obvious that people really loved each other and really wanted to support each other, were looking out for each other and really rejoicing in each other. And I thought, that's great, that's spiritual progress, that's spiritual attainment. So the more we can deepen our practice of metta and generate this deeper harmony, the more the Sangha will be strengthened and protected. And the more we as individuals will be able to progress, actually. Because harmony is what really supports individuality and spiritual growth. So when we as a Sangha achieve this harmony, and when we make collective efforts to keep in harmony, that offers a really attractive vision of the Dharma to other people. It's the Dharma in action. It's probably the most powerful way of spreading the Dharma that we have and having a positive effect in the world. And we should be careful about underestimating this. The last few introductory courses I've done, on the final week, we asked people what really struck them about the course. What did they take away from the course? What had really impressed them? What had really inspired them in a way? And very few people mentioned meditation, although that was probably the main reason why most people came to the course. Again and again, people were talking about sense of belonging, community, the friendly atmosphere of the place, the sense of harmony. So that really can have a powerful effect on people just coming through the door and experiencing a different type of atmosphere. You know, the world desperately needs more harmony, more metta, more solidarity. And collectively we can demonstrate that. We can demonstrate a different way of being that is really attractive to others. So I'll finish with some words of the Buddha. So he said, "Blissful is harmony in the Sangha. When the Sangha is in harmony, there are no arguments with one another, no abuse of one another, no ganging up on one another, no abandoning of one another. Then faith arises in those with little faith, while those who already have faith become even more inspired. Having created harmony in the Sangha, they rejoice for long ages."